Thanks to Matthew Datcher on Patreon for telling me about this new dMix 128 system from VioletAudio, which is another mixer that's going to be on display at InfoComm this weekend. This system is a 128 by 128 independently processed audio channel mixer. It has options and compatibility for MADI, AES-67, and of course Dante, and you can link up multiples of these together to do larger scale shows or installations. They're doing an HTML5 web-based controller for software control of this with remote devices, tablets, computers. I love that approach because there's no app and you can literally use any device with a browser to access this system and make changes, and I found that to be really convenient. They've done all custom software for these with third-party integration as a really high priority, so you can integrate these easily into Crestron, QSys, and other custom systems control packages to make complete system management and automation possible. That's a huge deal for the broadcast world, as well as AV integrators and show control specialists working in highly automated productions these days. With those high-profile users in mind, they've also packaged these mixers with redundant dual power supplies, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to be really happy to see that. And those are universal power supplies, 100 to 240 volts, 50 or 60 hertz. Having a look at the front panel, the first thing we can see are 4 banks of 8 to give us 32 XLR inputs, no combo jacks, just straight XLR and everything, and each one of those features an indicator light for both solo and phantom power at the channel level. Below that we have 2 indicator lights, one for each power supply. That's very nice that they've put that on the front so we can monitor those. Speaking of monitors, after that is a video display port output, and I can only assume that you'd be able to use the HTML5 browser locally to make adjustments to the unit with a monitor and keyboard connected to these ports. And of course, right next to that, we have USB A and C. Following that, we have MADI input and output natively supported on BNC with link lights right there on the front panel. And then we have our control network port on a professional EtherCon jack, followed by DNet A and B, and again, everything here with link lights to tell you the status. And I'm assuming their DNet there is an implementation of AES-67, but I'm not entirely sure. Following that, we have the option slot, and that Dante connectivity they were talking about is an option that you would need to presumably put into that card slot right there. Moving up from the option slot, there are 3 rows of 8 outputs for a total of 24 XLR outputs, and then above that 2 pairs of AES EBU inputs and outputs with sync light indicators, and finally to the right of that 2 separate headphone output buses with volume control on the hardware knobs there. So very versatile rack mounted unit, and quite a bit more processing power under the hood than what is represented here in physical I/O. And from that documentation we saw, they certainly have some plans for more I/O and possibly a really neat-looking control surface. Now, I would highly recommend that anybody who is seriously interested in these is head over to VioletAudio.com. I'll leave a link down below for all the real details, because there's an absolute ton of stuff on their site about this mixer. And not only can you read through all their stuff, they've already got the downloads page fully filled out with documentation, drivers, all sorts of deep dive documentation on the specifications and the protocols that they are using. It's really, really well documented. And then there's also, you can click over to the demo and actually go through the entire mixing console and see what all of these features look like and how the workflow looks and everything other than passing audio, obviously. But you're in the browser, you're in the control software that you would actually use with this mixer if you buy one. So that's pretty cool that you can really go through and dig into every possible feature and the way they've got it all laid out. And it looks very, very usable. It's super logical. The controls are very simple. This is something I was talking about recently in the Mackie Watts Touch Mix just the design styling. This is the kind of stuff that I love. It's dead simple. It gives you all the data you need. It gives you some quick shortcuts to make changes easier. And there's nothing overly stylized. They're not trying to, portray vintage, VU meters or anything. It's just really useful. Same thing when you go into these dynamics processors. There's a ton of information here, a ton of useful metering, input, output, gain reduction, metering. You can select sidechain sources very easily. There's preset drop downs that you can save presets to and load them from. And it's just very easy to jump into this with no prior experience and understand what's happening on this screen. And I love that simplicity and the fact that it's a web-based controller here. So you can do all of this from any browser, which just makes it all that much easier when you're trying to connect on a job site or in a remote location. You don't need to download or update an app or a device. You can just connect to the network, get a browser running, and you're in. And here, having a look at the fader page, you can see how logically things are laid out. Once again, up at the top here at the home icon, that brings us to our channel faders, and these are our channels going to our main left-right bus. And we can navigate along these channels by using these buttons here on the left. So right now we're at channel 1. If I hit channel 64, that advances us over to the right, and then we go further to the right to our effects. Again, more effects. After the effects, we've got subgroups. Then we've got matrix sends, aux sends, DCAs. You can also navigate using these arrows back and forth. And wherever you are in these channels, then up here along the top, we can flip into gain on faders. So those are all of our channel gain controls, along with phantom power and delay and polarity reverse. And I believe this also is a saturation control, if I remember correctly from what I've briefly looked at. And down below, we've also got some mute controls going on. Then we have aux on faders. You've got aux 1 through aux 24, so no shortage of aux sends on these mixers, and I think a lot of people are really going to appreciate that. And then we get into our effects sends. Again, we've got an absolute ton of them to use here, and you can dig into those more in a moment when we get over to the effects rack. Here's our matrix sends, matrix 1 through 8. Pretty self-explanatory there. You can select, though, between pre, post, and pre-processing on those. Here's our effects rack, and you can save and load effects chains. You can choose different types of effects, different presets within those effects. And again, they've gone with a very straightforward styling on these that doesn't clutter up the screen and take up a lot of real estate with trying to imitate traditional, metering and styling and everything. It just gives you the controls, gives you some nice large numbers. And we can see here on this delay that here's the tap tempo, or you can set it to have a global tap that would share that tempo between multiple effects units. Very handy stuff. More reverb. Here is a DX480, a lexicon looking reverb. That does have a little bit of styling to it, but just a little bit. And looks like there's 2 of those in that rack right there. Then we've got assignments and routing control here. Presumably, as you add more devices, you would be able to choose those from this drop-down menu, and then looks like you can do inputs, outputs, direct outputs, insert send, insert return, matrix in, matrix out. And there are provisions to copy and paste, and also to lock the routing so that it does not get messed with if somebody's digging around looking for other settings and they're unfamiliar. Here's an overview that looks like kind of a meter page, shows us everything coming in and going out. So that's probably pretty helpful when you're actually using the console, when you've got this much going on, 128 input channels. And here's all of our effects, matrices, aux masters, and subgroups. Over here, we'll take a quick look at the right-hand side. We've got an RTA, it looks like, and presumably that can be assigned to different things. There's a hold function, and then there is a coarse or fine setting there on that. There's an oscillator that you can assign to any of the 24 auxes or the main left, right, and then down here it looks like we can adjust the frequency on the oscillator. And then over here, we can switch that over to pink noise if we don't want that sine wave. And you can also set a limit of a max of minus 24 dB. So when you kick that in, it doesn't scare the pants off of you, because that's definitely happened to me in the past. And then there's a monitoring section. There were those two Q buses or monitor headphone buses represented on the front with those physical outputs and hardware volume controls. So we've got some control over those monitor settings, how they are actually set up, how they function, and how you want the different PFL and AFL volumes to interact with the main level that you're using. If we go out of this settings mode and click on the globe, then we kind of get this additional view selection here where we can choose to view our channels, our effects, our subgroups, matrix sends, and then, those are view group is empty. So it looks like you can do some custom view groups, do custom layers there, 6 of those. And then we've got mute groups, again, empty. I haven't assigned anything to the mute groups, but 6 mute groups plus an all mute and an effects mute. So truly 8 mute groups. They've just made a couple of handy ones there, and then solo and mute clear buttons below that. So if you're using this on a tablet, that would be very handy because you've got your main left and right fader there as well, and then all of this control to choose what your left hand is going to be able to manipulate on the other part of the screen. So that's the basic layout. And if this looks familiar at all to you, that's because Danny Olesh designed the Soundcraft UI series mixers, which also used a very similar browser-based controller that I absolutely loved. So he's probably the reason why this all seems so familiar if you've ever used one of those mixers before. And I think a lot of folks are really going to be very, very excited to actually get one of these out and use it and see how it works. And hopefully the rest of those peripherals, those stage boxes, that control surface will be somewhere coming down the line. Here's a look at the channel EQ. Sorry, I've kind of been jumping around and I didn't go through everything. So on the channel level, we've got this screen here that kind of gives you an overview of where your source is coming from, your gain represented there. You've got your phantom power, you've got high pass, low pass filter on and off. And then again, that saturation control that we saw on the other view. And then the processing order here can be unlocked and you can move these around: gate, compressor, parametric EQ, de-esser, multi-band compressor, graphic EQ, and then an effects insert, send and return. And you can move these around. We can lock those again and have a look at things like this multi-band compressor. Really amazing to have that on every single channel along with the compressor, and then having a gate and a compressor and not having to get rid of one of those to put a de-esser in the chain. Like, I'm absolutely loving how much processing there is on every channel here. And I really hope to get to try one of these myself, because I think a lot of folks are going to love this. I think this is a really usable looking rack mounted package that could give a lot of folks something to think about, because I don't know how many of the people, taking something like a wing rack, for instance, out on a tour. I don't know how often you're bothering to use the screen on the front of that mixer. I would assume you're doing most of the stuff remotely on some sort of tablet or a computer. And, if you don't need that screen, it's one more thing to break. And to have more inputs, more outputs, and just an absolute ton of processing power, this is a really professional looking package, a really professional looking feature set, and the hardware looks equally as robust. And I just can't wait to see these in person. I honestly wish I was going to InfoComm now to have a look at this and talk to the folks that are involved in them, because it's really going to be exciting to see how these work and have a look at them in person. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts and opinions on this and what you think of these. Of course, a lot of folks are going to want to know the price before they form an opinion. I can't blame you. Who knows? Again, trade shows, they're probably not going to have a price on these at the trade show, or maybe not even anytime soon until they figure out a distribution and manufacturing channel for these to be available to us to buy. You know, who knows what that's going to look like or how soon that's going to happen. So I hope it is very soon. I think these look amazing. And like I said, I can't wait to actually put some audio through one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you here very soon.